The Magnificent Battle, Merlin, Arthur's Court, and the Mistress of Time. By the Magus. Read by the Magus. Chapter 5. The Summons. The large owl flew silently across the nighttime sky. There was a moon, and though not yet full in that light, you might have seen him flying with silent, steady haste over the lake, past the darkened castle on the hill, above and through the tall trees that stood at the entrance to the forest, then on toward a spark of light that glittered from the highest peak that looked out over the land. The people were afraid of whatever caused the spark of light. Some said it was a coven of witches. Some said the fairy folk were gathered there for their pagan rites, while some said the devil himself resided in the woods, waiting to take the soul of one who found himself lost in the dense isolation of the forest. Cador had no such fear. The spark of light was the owl's destination. Cador was no ordinary owl, but was, in fact, a courier from the Council of Elders, with a summons to the greatest wizard of his time, and perhaps of all time. The council had need of his great power, though the quest might even be beyond what he could accomplish, involving great danger. Cador was fully aware of the urgency of his flight. With his keen eyesight, he could see the nearly imperceptible light from an open window cut into a cliff in the distance ahead. He flew straight for his destination, into the open window, and landed on his usual spot on a rafter in the darkest corner of the night-shrouded room. He shook the beaded drops from his mist-dampened wings and assumed his customary sharp-eyed surveillance of his surroundings. From the faint glow of the hearth and a nearly spent candle, Cador noticed the nod of greeting from his old friend, who was engaged in some kind of experiment or other. He was surprised that Cador was back so soon, and pulled the curtain over the open window so that even the faint illumination could not be seen from outside. Such a speedy return signaled that there was some unusual news, some notification of events in the world of magi. Such notices rarely were much more than information he should know, and, though interesting, rarely demanded anything from him. He continued his experiment. Even realizing the urgency, Cador waited patiently on the old wizard. It is a virtue of owls that they can wait patiently. Cador was thought of as Merlin's owl, because his usual station was in Merlin's hideaway. Owls, however, don't belong to anyone. It is true that they can be captured and held against their will, but really, owls belong only to themselves. Cador agreed to stay with Merlin, well, because Merlin was Merlin. Cador preferred his company to that of his fellow owls, or for that matter, to anyone he knew. With Merlin there was always a swirl of magic, always a coming and going of talking animals, fairies, and beings rarely seen in the world of men, and always a blurry line between the worlds of men, nature, and that of the spirit. Cador shuffled from foot to foot, and waited for Merlin to finish pouring some kind of steaming liquid into a flask and store it safely on a shelf, before taking a piece of meat from the pantry and handing it to the hungry owl. Cador took it gently with one of those dangerously sharp claws, nodded thanks, and tore off a hunk, and began devouring it eagerly. Between bites, he allowed Merlin to remove the message from his leg, finished his meal, hooted his pleasure, then closed his eyes for a bit of rest from his long flight. Merlin read the message, stopped, and stared into the distance, then read it again. It was more than a notice. It was a summons. He was to appear at the Council of Elders at the next full moon to receive a commission. A commission? He wondered. What kind of commission? He pondered. Certainly there were wizards involved in lesser projects than he for the handling of commissions. He thought of what it could be. The Council of Elders knew that he was already involved in a very important task. He was counselor, advisor, and occasionally the illusion and magic maker in Arthur's court. It was the most responsible position outside of the council. He had to assure that Arthur survived and was able to rule effectively. If they wanted to take him away from there for some other commission, it must be important indeed. As to what it could be, he hadn't a clue. Merlin looked at the set of carved stones that he had made for keeping track of the phases of the moon, a convenient device for men, though he knew the moon too intimately to require the stones for more than decoration. 2 nights from now, he pondered. The short notice impressed upon him the importance of their summons. Usually a summons was issued at least 2 weeks in advance, but this one, 2 nights, he thought. The business of the Council of Elders was always of great gravity. They didn't meet for lunch and friendly conversation. To be summoned in such a manner meant there was some important issue for consideration. Apparently, Merlin was going to be involved in it. He sat down by the round table near the window, lit the lamp in its center, and reread the message. It was only when he re-examined the message that he noticed the small symbol on the bottom. It looked something like a very elaborate letter Q. It was a symbol that only those associated with the Council of Elders knew, in case even an owl should fall to the archer's bow and the message be intercepted. Merlin took a deep breath. For others, the symbol would seem merely a mark of identification, like a signature or a seal. For Merlin, the symbol was a code that meant danger, and that he should expect potentially deadly resistance. It meant there was an enemy, someone or some group, that wanted either to kill him, to destroy the council, or perhaps a threat to King Arthur and his court. Merlin folded the message and began planning his next meeting with the council. This one had the appearance of being less than pleasant.